All right, welcome everybody. Happy to have you all here. I appreciate you joining us for our Hearing and Wellness educational seminar today. This is sponsored by Premier Hearing Solutions and Widex. And I know many of you were first kind of introduced to the virtual webinar series through the flyer. So we're happy that you took the opportunity to join us. I'm Susan DeMont. I'm a Widex clinical product specialist or trainer and have been with Widex for about 5 years. I'm an audiologist and had a practice very similar to Premier Hearing. So I'm happy to introduce Scott Aitken, who is the specialist and owner of Premier Hearing Solutions.
Thank you,
Scott,
Susan.
if you want to say hi and maybe just share a little bit about Premier Hearing Solutions and yourself.
Oh, sure. Well, I've been in the business for a little while now. I started off at a private practice and then ended up working a little bit of retail. I did a little bit of doctor's offices as well. And I've had a pretty wide range of experiences of each one. And I decided to kind of marry what I thought was best for patients and to take care of them best I can. So I created my own business. And during these times, I had a good opportunity to start that. So I'm excited about being able to take care of patients in a way that I think meets them with the most amount of integrity and honesty. So I'm very excited about that.
Great, great. Today we're going to talk on several different topics, and certainly I want this to be more of a kind of a conversation. So for those that are listening, feel free to type in your questions either through what you'll see as a Q&A or in the chat. I also have joining us today Ben Ditch. He's a Widex Regional Sales Manager for South Florida. So he's helping us kind of to monitor and work in the background, either answering questions or making sure that both Scott and I have those questions so we can address those questions. So I'll go ahead and kind of jump right in. We're going to talk about kind of the incidence, how common is hearing loss, and then what are the effects of living with hearing loss. So I guess the first thing that I would say when looking at the numbers is if you are experiencing a little change in your hearing or hearing loss, or maybe you have a friend or family member, a loved one that's living and coping with hearing loss, know that you're not alone. There's over 48 million Americans, 20% of us have some degree of hearing loss. And of course, as we age and get a little bit older, the incidence, the likelihood of having some hearing loss increases. 40% of individuals at age 65 or older are found to have hearing loss. So how do you know if you have hearing loss? And many times we don't notice it ourselves because hearing changes often in a very slow and gradual way. So subtle that we may not notice it, but it may be our family members or friends or workmates that begin to notice that we're not hearing as well as we once did. Quite often people will say, I can hear everything, but I just can't understand. So it's not that things aren't loud enough, but it's the clarity that is sometimes first noticeable. So if you're beginning to find yourself either when you're out to dinner with friends or you're watching a TV program or in just, kind of conversational listening, if you find that you hear the voice, but the words are beginning to run together a little bit, that might be one of the first indications. Certainly, if you're in that noisy restaurant, lots of people all talking at the same time, and you're trying to hear that one voice against the background of the many voices, that is a very common, challenging listening situation. And even with a very mild beginning stage hearing difficulty, that can be a very noticeable situation for hardship. Also in like places of worship, those environments where you're trying to hear a voice that's far away from you, maybe that distance makes the voice a little softer, or maybe it's being amplified, but there's a little bit of echo, reverberation in those kind of environments. That can also add to listening difficulties. And if you find that you're frequently having to ask people to repeat, you've kind of developed that little habit of saying, huh, or pardon, those kind of subtle habits.
Human language, right?
Yes, yeah. Quite often that's kind of the first thing. We're not catching the whole sentence or the whole question. So we're needing that little bit of extra information. And that's often because we're missing hearing a word or two, in that sentence to be sure of what's being talked about or what's being asked. And then, of course, for all of us, even with normal hearing, we depend on what we see as well as what we hear for conversational ease of listening. And if our hearing starts to decline a little bit, we tend to rely more on those, what we call visual cues, seeing a person's face to hear easily and hear comfortably. So if you're starting to find that you're really having to look at people and you depend on them being facing you and looking at you to easily hear what's being said, and if they start and then they turn away and you lose the end of that sentence, that's probably because your ears aren't catching as much as what they used to. And then, of course, if you're turning the volume up on the TV or on the radio, that's usually kind of the first indication. But again, that can happen so slowly that you don't really recognize that you've gone from, level 2 or 3 to level 6, level 8 on a 1 to 10 scale.
It's funny you say that, because that is so true. Every time I fit a patient with hearing aids, they come back and the first thing they tell me, that TV went from whatever the number is, 50 down to 20 or whatever it is. And you talked about it being very gradual. A visualization I like to give my patients is, think of like a jar of pennies just sitting on the table. If somebody came by once a day and took a few pennies out, you wouldn't really notice it quite at first. But after a few years of that, you're going to start to say, hey, I think I'm missing some pennies here.
Yeah.
So it's just as gradual, just slow, and just a little bit at a time, to where we start maybe the things you just named right here. The TV's too loud, or we're looking at people's faces, and especially with the masks right now. I mean, people are having such a hard time, big time. A lot of people come up and say, I didn't think I had that much of a hearing issue, but now that I'm having to deal with this, I can't read lips, can't look for visual clues, and there's plexiglass in the way and a mask on. They're having the hardest time, and I can see why.
Yeah, most definitely. And actually, that's true. As quite often people come in and they'll say, well, it just seems like everybody mumbles these days.
Mumbles.
Well, and since we're all talking through masks, we are kind of mumbled or mumbly. But, and I will admit, we all do have those people in our lives, friends, family, that are what we call those soft talkers, or those people that just don't move their mouth much,
Sure, yeah.
So there are some mumblers, but if you're finding that like more and more people seem to be mumbling, well, it might be a little bit more on your ears rather than on their manner of speech. So, and typically it's kind of a combination of these things that subtly begin to change and become more noticeable, and you become more aware of it, or our family and friends become more aware, and will encourage us to say, hey, maybe it's time you go get your hearing checked.
Sure.
Certainly, and in regards to that, as we get older, actually the American Medical Association says starting at age 50, everybody should get a baseline hearing test, because you want to know kind of where you stand even before you begin to have problems. But we know as we get older, in fact, 2/3 of people by the age of 70 have measurable hearing loss, and that might be mild to moderate, or moderate, to severe. So we also know that the longer that we live with hearing loss untreated, even as a mild degree of loss, it causes our brain to have to work harder, which ages our brain. So we know a mild hearing loss can be equal to about a 7-year decline or age in brain function and cognitive function, which just means our brain is struggling a little bit more, slowing down, not processing as quickly. The good news is hearing loss is treatable. And if we do restore our hearing ability and bring those sounds back into the brain can kind of respond and perk back up. So it's called neural plasticity. And so the brain can kind of rewire itself and use that information again. So we do know as we age, and as we age with some hearing loss, it does increase our risk for cognitive impairment by about 24%. There's also an aspect to kind of slow progressive loss where, we do find at some point that, oh my goodness, I used to love going out for coffee with my group of friends. I got 5 or 6 friends and we used to meet all the time. But being in the coffee shop, it was kind of noisy. It was just becoming so hard to hear. And it took so much energy and effort that I've stopped going. And it's that kind of slow and subtle isolation from the social situations that we used to enjoy can also be related to increasing cognitive difficulties. Our brain needs that stimulation to stay active and to stay quick, in response. So as we kind of live with hearing loss that's declining over time, and we kind of stop going to certain kind of activities, social activities, to church, to classes, taking classes, that isolation has not only a negative impact on our overall mental health and sometimes quality of life, but has an impact too on our brain's actual ability to function well. So I don't know about you, Scott, but most people coming in, say for that first hearing test, one of their main complaints that you always hear is, well, I just can't hear a noise if I'm in any kind of background noise.
Mhm.
That's usually what they begin to notice first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And something I noticed on the other slide, a lot of those facts, they came from Johns Hopkins, right? A lot of the research
Yeah.
came
A
from
lot of these are from studies that now have been going on for at least the last 10 to 15 years.
Absolutely.
Because this has been kind of our focus in the research and development field, is understanding the whole brain hearing combination and how they are related.
Right.
Just know that even without hearing loss, as you get older, you need the volume of the voice to be a little bit higher than the background noise than, say, someone with younger ears. So it's even just our brain aging requires the speech that we're trying to hear to be louder by 3 to 5 dB than the background noise than someone would need with, let's say, at age 35 or 40, or even at age 50. Because what happens as we get older, the brain needs more information to accurately comprehend, understand the conversation that we're listening to. And of course, even if you're starting to have a little bit of brain slowing, when we're in challenging listening situations, those little bit of cognitive difficulties are more pronounced. They show up more so. So if we have that aspect of just our brain needing a little more time and more information, and then we add even a mild amount of hearing loss on top of that, that's what typically contributes to this complaint. Like, I can hear everybody's voices, but I can't understand a word when I'm in that noisy restaurant, or I'm in the car. Even that kind of engine noise or road noise can interfere with ease of conversational listening. So I want to do just a quick little exercise, and it relates to how this brain and ear function work. Remember, we hear with our ear, but we understand with our brain, right? So the brain typically does a really good job of being able to distinguish between a voice and background sound, or a voice that we want to hear against a bunch of other voices, say in that noisy restaurant. The brain typically can do a pretty good job at distinguishing between those things, but it does need a complete sound picture to hear that voice and understand the conversation. We can fill in kind of the things that we might miss, maybe because of a beginning hearing loss. And the brain can kind of piece together, if it doesn't get every word, it can typically kind of piece together the content or the topic of that sentence and do a pretty good job of guessing. But of course, the better it can understand the sound that it's receiving, the better function the brain produces. And the brain does typically a pretty good job of filtering out the unwanted sound, the background sounds that aren't important, from, again, the important sounds that we're listening to, whether that's a voice or music even outdoor environmental sound. But as the brain struggles to kind of fill in the gaps, and particularly as our hearing may get worse, maybe from year to year, that extra energy and effort is what we call cognitive loading. And it takes energy and effort to compensate for. So I want to do this kind of fun little exercise, and it's quick and easy. I want everybody to participate. So what I'm going to do first is say the colors of the dots out loud, if you will, and read them from kind of left to right. So if everybody's ready, say these out loud for me. Okay, I'm sure everybody did pretty good. That was an easy task, right? You all probably very quickly just went through red, blue, green, yellow. So we're going to do kind of the same thing again, a little different instruction this time. I want you to say the colors in which the words are printed. So again, out loud, if you will, quickly as you can, reading from left to right, say the color in which the word is printed. Ready? Okay, so still not too difficult, but my guess is the first thing you wanted to say was the word hard or the word when, not the color green or red or white or blue. So in this, I'm making your brain kind of multitask. Your brain is having to say, oh, I see the word hard, but no, I'm not supposed to say that word. I'm supposed to say the color that it's printed in, and that color is green. So say the word green. And you have to do that for each word. And again, multitasking, it starts to take a little bit of extra energy and effort and time, of course. So we're going to do one more. Same instructions as before. Say the colors in which the words are printed. Out loud, quick as you can, left to right. Here we go. Now, my guess is that took a little bit of extra time because now the word is a color. And so your brain kind of gets real confused. It wants to say the word red. It recognizes that's a color, but it's not the color the word is printed in. So typically at this point, the response begins to kind of slow. And I want you to just kind of pay attention to how you felt. I mean, it was a little bit stressful, right? And it took a little bit of extra time. You really had to think about what the task was and what I was asking for you to do. This energy, this effort, this extra multitasking, that's what we call cognitive loading. That's what someone with hearing loss experiences when they're in that group social situation, having coffee with their best friends, and conversation is going around the table, and they're having to work hard to follow that conversation, to fill in the missing pieces, fill in those gaps. If you've been in that situation, you might know that when you come home, you're exhausted. Or you might find, gee, after 20 or 30 minutes, I just kind of have to sit back and take a break because it is taking that extra energy.
I think some of the research shows that it takes about 20% more energy for your brain to focus when you have a hearing loss to do those types of things. So that can be just total stressor. By the end of the day, at least, you know.
Yeah, exhausting.
If you have to do it all day long, or if you're working in any environment with noise, it just makes it that much more stressful.
Yeah, think about those people that are, you know, working at the grocery store and they're in constant noise and then trying to hear conversation and questions over that background. So probably they're experiencing, you know, an extra 40% being in noise. So understanding just kind of what that experience is and how it can lead to isolating us, and then how all of that extra effort and isolation can take its toll on just overall kind of brain awareness and brain fitness. So there are ways that we can use tools to compensate for that. So the first question is, well, you know, how do I know if I have hearing loss? How are you going to measure that? And, you know, what kind of things may cause the hearing loss? So that's kind of the next section we're going to jump into. And I'll just to pause for a second to see if there are any questions so far from the audience, Ben.
No questions as of yet. You are always very thorough, so I'll let you know if there are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
So let's just talk about, there are two main types of hearing loss. One we call conductive. This occurs either from the outer ear towards the eardrum, and it represents actually a kind of a small percentage of hearing loss. And it results in an interruption in the transmission of sound vibration. So that can be caused by something simple, like just wax building up in the ear. You may have been in an accident, had either a perforated eardrum, or maybe even some people with a head injury. Maybe they've been in a car accident, had a good bang to the head, and those three little bones in the middle ear can become disrupted or broken, as compared to what we call a sensory neural loss. So this is common, often called nerve loss or nerve deafness, and represents really the majority of hearing loss that we see. And this occurs in the inner ear. It's often caused by exposure to loud noise or loud sound, certain kind of health issues, like high blood pressure, diabetes, can also contribute to it. And sometimes we inherit a tendency for this type of loss. So in this case, the sound vibration is making it down to the inner ear, but those little nerve fibers in the inner ear that are responsible for turning the mechanical vibration of sound into a nerve impulse are what become damaged. And once they're damaged, they're gone. They don't come back. So this sensory neural loss is a more permanent type of hearing loss. Now, typically, if we could look into your cochlea, we could kind of see where those nerve fibers are going. Unfortunately, we can't do that only posthumously. So only in someone who has passed can we actually see into this tiny little inner ear called the cochlea. But there is a window into how you're hearing and how those three little bones, how the inner ear, how the hearing nerve is transmitting sound up to the brain and the auditory cortex for understanding. And the way in which we do this is through what we call the hearing test or the audiogram. So those of you that have had your hearing tested before, remember, we've probably put you into a very quiet place, maybe into a sound booth or a very quiet room. And we've had you listen to a variety of different pitches of tones. And we kind of go from bass tones to treble tones. And we ask you, tell us when you hear it. And we try to make it as soft as possible and mark that point at which the softest sound for that particular pitch that you can hear. And that's what we end up with, what we call the audiogram. So when we look at the audiogram, which we're going to look at in just a minute, we're mostly concerned about how you hear speech sounds. And of course, in speech, there are consonant sounds and vowel sounds. And these occur at different pitch ranges and different volume or intensities. So you can probably guess, of the vowels and the consonants, which are the most important for understanding conversation? If you said consonants, you got it right. And guess what? They are the softest and highest pitch sounds. Vowels carry the voice or the volume. Consonants carry the information or the clarity. There are other environmental sounds, which obviously are important to hear too, because hearing is a 24/7 sense. It never shuts off. Important for understanding conversation, but it's also important for us to hear all the sounds around us, whether it's the birds outside, the alarm clock going off in the morning, or maybe if we're out taking a walk, hearing a car approaching from behind, hearing those kind of sounds. So it helps us to be in touch with what's going on in our environment.
Now, a good example of that too, Susan, is
yeah.
if you try to make an A sound, for example, A, you can yell that down the hallway, but the letter P, it's only going to go so far. I can't scream that down the hallway. So that's another good example maybe for that, for people to kind of understand.
Exactly right. And actually, yes, this is kind of the most common kind of hearing test result we get. When we chart your audiogram, we plot everything for the right ear in red and the left ear in blue. So when I look at the graph now, I can see both ears are hearing about the same, and I see you have Good hearing, being at the top of the graph, means you can hear those very soft sounds. So that 0 to 20 level is normal. You even have pretty good hearing in the mid frequencies, right at 1,000 hertz. But guess what? It's the beginning stage of not hearing some of those consonant sounds. So was that sound cat, cats, tat, pat? You know, those STP, SHCH sounds. Now I'm not hearing them quite as well as I did. So I'm having to kind of guess at what the right word was to fill in the blank. I'm still hearing all the vowel sounds, so the voice is loud enough. And this is the person that starts to say, I can hear, but I can't always understand, particularly if I'm in kind of a noisy environment. As hearing loss sometimes progresses, now even in the middle of the graph, really looking at most of the consonants would be very difficult to distinguish. So this person is really starting to experience that I hear their voice, I know they're talking, but even if I'm in a quiet place, if they're not like looking directly at me, I might not understand everything that they're saying. So this is, by this point, I've got more of a moderate degree of hearing loss in the most important speech ranges. And then of course, over time, or maybe due to different types of things contributing to the hearing loss, a more severe degree of loss, now even the vowel sounds are hard to distinguish. And this individual would be telling us, I need to be looking at the person, they need to be looking directly at me, and they have to be within, you know, maybe 4 or 5 feet for me to easily hear what they're saying. If they turn away from me, the voice disappears.
Yeah. They're more likely looking for visual clues too at this point, big time.
Yes, they definitely are going to need to see as well as hear. Any of these degrees of loss we can fit with amplification. And the idea behind using hearing aids, amplification, is to restore the area that you need. Maybe if you still have good hearing for some of those bass tones, we want to let you use that good hearing part, but restore the part that has started to drop down from the bottom of this graph. Scott, is there anything else that when someone comes in for maybe that baseline audiogram, is there anything else that you want to kind of share with them that you do at that initial visit so they kind of know what to expect?
Absolutely. So that's the start of it. You know, we do that, but then we also do some speech tests. So we try to determine, well, how has this, if there's a hearing loss, how has it affected my brain's ability to process speech? A little bit, a lot. So we do some speech discrimination tests on that. And then we also do some testing to see, well, how is this affecting my speech and noise? So we do other tests like the quick speech and noise test. So that determines, well, we give them a clear sentence more or less, and then they keep adding, you know, noise into each other sentence. And by the last two, usually even myself, you know, granted, I have a really hard time with that as well. So it really gives us a good measurement of, well, how are they struggling, or if they're struggling at all, is speech and noise. So
right,
we do try to figure it.
I've had a few patients that have, you know, just a very, very mild amount of loss, but they really complain about having a lot of difficulty in noise. And
the thing is, our world is noisier than it's ever been.
Oh yeah.
Even people with relatively normal hearing are having trouble, and it's becoming more apparent that we're getting noisier and noisier for sure.
Yeah. So you might be kind of asking like, okay, oh, I've had my hearing tested. I know I've got a little bit of hearing difficulty, but you know, what do I do now? And that's where when we look at some of the solutions that involved use of technology, it has changed so dramatically over the past 10 to 20 years. I laugh just looking at it or remembering VHS, a landline telephone with a dial, a rotary dial. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
Even cassette tapes. You know, all of this kind of technology now actually can fit in your pocket, mostly through the use of your smartphone. And the wonderful thing about hearing technology now is we can use all of the intelligent design in that smartphone and coordinate it with your hearing aids if need be. Hearing aids themselves have really developed to a point where they respond to the environment that you're in. So you don't have to think about your ears or your hearing. They do all the hard work for you. But now, if you want, with the link of your smartphone to the hearing aids, now you have extra control as well. So kind of like all of these big clunky things that we used to use for communication and for entertainment, all are tiny and fit right in the palm of our hand. So many of you may already have tried hearing aids, maybe have or currently wearing hearing aids. And quite often the question is, well, when do I need to think about whether or not I need new hearing aids? And just a couple things to consider is, you know, typically when your technology is getting older, and I guess by antiquated, I would mean that maybe you have hearing aids that are 5 or 6 or 7 years old. Hearing aids will last with good care, even though you wear them most all day, every day. So there is some wear and tear that happens on these tiny little devices. But after a period of time, maybe 5 years or more, there may have been enough change in the technology itself that there might be some new advances, some new features that would help you even more.
And Susan, that's one of the things that comes up a lot in research is that most people are looking for hearing aids. The national average is about 5.6 years.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily because the hearing aid went bad or died. It's just, it's changed so much, the technology. There actually might be something that can get them to hear better. So they're interested in looking into those types of things.
That's
just
right.
as quick as our computers are changing, we all have a smartphone or seen a smartphone or a computer. Just as fast as those things are changing, we know the technology in a good way is changing with it. So that's a positive.
You're getting smarter and smarter as well.
Absolutely.
You know, certainly if even with your current hearing aids, you find you're still struggling in certain situations, struggling to hear conversation with family or friends. If you have to take your hearing aids out in a noisy environment, you really shouldn't need to do this anymore. Hearing aids are smart enough to recognize the louder kind of non-speech or lots of people all talking, those kind of sounds from a voice. And they're smart enough to be able to decrease the background sound while they enhance the conversation that you're looking to hear. So you should be able to put your hearing aids in kind of the beginning of the day in the morning and move through all the different listening environments with comfort and with ease of hearing. Now, sometimes people will find that maybe just recently they're significantly not hearing the way they used to. Sometimes this can be in terms of the function of the hearing aid itself, but sometimes it can also be that their hearing has changed recently. In most cases, the change is very gradual, but occasionally we'll see kind of a sudden shift in hearing, and all of a sudden it's a much more noticeable issue for them. If you find you have to take out your hearing aids to use the telephone, or you just avoid using the phone, that is one of the things that has greatly improved just in the recent past, is the hearing aid and the phone to be able to coordinate together and increase that ease of hearing.
Probably some of my patients' favorite thing about some of the newer technologies, I'll go down the hallway and call them on their cell phone, and they're just tickled pink that they can hear all the way over there, you know. So
I know, it's like, I haven't been able to do this in years, you know, to have that conversation so easily. Yeah. And as hearing aids do get older, as we've kind of talked about, it's not uncommon that with wear and tear, they may need some repair. So if you find that maybe every year you're having to put money into repairing the hearing instruments, it may be better to take that investment and put it into new hearing aids, which will, you know, function probably better and give you good functionality for a period of years to come. Plus, in many cases, for the first couple of years, hearing aids are under warranty. So even if there is an issue, it's covered for you. So sometimes it's instead of kind of continuing to spend money on aids that we know are going to, on an ongoing way, need some service and repair, it's better to put that investment into something newer. And certainly if you have what we call ITD or ITP hearing aids. Scott, can you guess what those stand for?
In the drawer hearing aids?
Yeah, in the drawer, or like my father, in the pocket.
In the pocket, yeah. In the pocket, in the drawer, yeah.
Yeah. So, you invest in this technology, and it's important that you be getting benefit out of it. We don't want that investment to be sitting in a dresser drawer or sitting in your pocket.
I can't
We
tell you how
want,
many times I've had patients come in, they said,
I
I
know,
went to Costco and I got hearing aids and they threw me out the door. I just stuck them in the drawer. I said, well, why were you doing that? So, well, I don't know that I heard much better with them on. Like, well, let's see if we can take care of you. Let's see if we can get that solved. So
that's right. Yeah, you've
yeah,
invested in something, you want to get benefit and get your
absolutely.
money's worth out of that. So
Absolutely.
that's important as well. I'm going to chat for just a moment about the Moment, Widex's newest hearing aid called the Moment. And it comes in a variety of different styles. The most popular style these days, really worldwide, but certainly in the US, is the tiny, tiny little over the ear style. We call it a receiver in the canal. So there's a tiny little portion that hides just at the top of your ear, a wire that's almost invisible, leading down to a little speaker with a dome on the end that holds that secure in your ear and then delivers that sound to your ear canal. These are popular for a couple of reasons. One, cosmetically, because they're hard to see, so people don't even know you have it on. But two, because it's very comfortable and easy to get used to. We do still have custom in the ear hearing instruments in a variety of sizes, from a CIC to a canal style to a half or full shell style, because some people prefer for everything to be all in one piece that they can kind of tuck into the opening of their ear canal. So the Widex Moment family offers a style variety that we can find that you will be comfortable and appealing to you to use as well. The actual goal of hearing aids today, and particularly with the Widex Moment, is, as I mentioned before, to be intelligent enough to recognize the situation that you're in and to respond to it automatically and to respond to it kind of transparently. Because the bottom line is, we want for you to only have to do two things. That is, remember to put the hearing aid in at the beginning of the morning and remember to take it out before you go to bed. During the course of your day, whether you're moving through just a few different listening situations or a whole variety, we want to be able to go through the day without having to think about our ears or our hearing. And with the Widex Moment and the way that it's designed to be automatic and adaptive to your environments, it does the work for you. And it does it in such a way that you don't hear it making those adjustments. You just know you're hearing comfortably and you're hearing conversation with much greater ease.
And Susan, I might add to that as well, because I've had experience. I don't have a hearing loss per se. I do have some tinnitus and ringing in the ears, but I have had a chance to demo these out and just wear them at a lower prescription. And as I'm walking from room to room, I notice, wow, these are really changing to their environment. I hop in the car, it changes again.
Right.
The church environment changes again. It's amazing how quickly it's picking up on speech sounds and dialing in on them and focusing in. So they do everything they say they do it. And I know that for a fact because I've worn them and I know how they operate. And they have
and I'm glad you brought that up, because when we've given people a chance to listen to the Widex Moment, and particular, there's a certain processing strategy called pure sound within the Moment. And these descriptions that you see are those people's comments on that listening experience. And I'd say that typically there are maybe 3 or 4 that are most common. They tell me that it sounds very natural. I'm not even aware that I have a hearing aid on. They tell me that it's a more pleasant, kind of more comfortable sound. They feel like the sound of their own voice is of more natural kind of quality. And in many cases, they say, the conversation is much easier. I have a much better ability to understand without the feeling of having amplification on.
Right. And one of the things that I noticed, working with all different types of hearing aids, I've tried them all. Phonak, Siemens, Signia, Oticon, you name it, I've pretty much heard it and worked with it. But the biggest thing I noticed about the Moment is when I put that in, I put on the pure sound, is there's no rushing sound. There's no like static or noise. It just eliminates it. Yep. So it's really remarkable how much it's changed and how that zero delay time really makes a difference.
It does.
especially for people with a mild to moderate hearing loss. So.
Yeah, I've often had clients actually reach up and say, "Are you sure it's on?" And it's like, "Oh no, it's on. It just sounds natural. It sounds like better hearing without, all of the other kind of amplification kind of distortions." I mentioned before that, the hearing aid really should do the lion's share of the work for you. But there are times when you may want to have a little bit of extra control. So I mentioned that, your smartphone, whether it's an Apple iPhone or whether it's an Android platform, has the ability to have an app that is kind of paired to your hearing aids. And then with the touch of one finger, you can make changes to have better hearing in the situation that you're in, right when you need it. And this app is designed really user-friendly, very easy to use. But it does give you, if you do want to have occasionally that little bit of extra control, the ability to do that. There are also a whole variety of accessories that can go with hearing aids. Maybe for certain special listening situations, maybe you still have that landline phone. You're not using a smartphone, but you have the landline phone at home. You want to be able to hear more readily with both ears on the landline phone. So we have a phone Dex 2 accessory. Maybe you are in certain situations where the person you're hearing is a little bit of a distance away from you. Maybe if you are in a meeting kind of situation, sitting at a long conference table, and you need to be able to hear the person way at the other end of the table, which might be 15, 20 feet away, as well as you hear the person right next to you. We have accessories that allow you to have kind of a remote microphone. So you can place a microphone on the table at the other end and hear that person like they were sitting right next to you. So TV accessories, a variety of things. The hearing aids will do the job in most cases, but occasionally with maybe a little bit more degree of hearing loss, having these extra kind of connections to sound can make enjoyability of those situations increased. I'll mention just briefly about tinnitus. Scott, you mentioned that you have tinnitus too. Tinnitus is that ringing, buzzing, hissing, any kind of sound that you might be hearing that's not actually coming from the environment. That's what we call tinnitus or tinnitus. And it can be in one ear, both ears, maybe even sounding more like it's coming from the middle of your head. Tinnitus can have some negative impacts on our overall quality of life. Luckily for most people, they do kind of learn to ignore or to manage it. But for some people, it interferes with their ability to sleep at night. It may even interfere with their ability to listen to conversation, to focus, to concentrate. In many cases, it can be quite annoying and irritating, and this can cause more frustration and more stress. So the incidence of tinnitus is also very high. 50 million Americans report it. And again, it can be any kind of sound that you're hearing that's not actually in the environment. In most cases, it's related to some hearing loss. About 90% of people with tinnitus also, when we test their hearing, have some degree of hearing loss. But it can also be related to maybe loud sound or noise exposure, ear infections. Some medications can cause tinnitus to get louder or more annoying. And then certainly some things like having high blood pressure or diabetes, those kind of other health issues can contribute. And of course, there's things like caffeine and alcohol, even chocolate, that can cause tinnitus to become more noticeable. There is no one single cure for it because everybody experiences this in a very different way and from a variety of different reasons for it. But Widex does have what we call the Zen program that is in all Widex hearing aids, regardless of style and regardless of technology level. It uses some sound therapy, and Widex has a unique approach of using a melodic kind of music sound therapy. And this has a proven track record of being successful in helping manage your tinnitus. FDA has cleared this device for use with tinnitus. And it kind of incorporates the benefits of music sound therapy It helps us to learn how to ignore the tinnitus. So it has a long-term benefit of lowering the annoyance and disruption of the tinnitus. Based on a music kind of approach, it also provides relaxation, and our studies have shown that it can even improve your concentration. And as I mentioned, the Zen feature is available in all levels and all styles of Widex technology. So it's something that can be turned on and accessed for you if you need it. If you find after a period of time it's done its job and you don't need it any longer, we can take it back out, put it back in if your tinnitus were to come back. So just know that if you are experiencing a little bit of that, that's something you do want to mention when you go in for your hearing test or your baseline audiogram, because there are some things that we do to kind of measure and evaluate the tinnitus and its disruption.
I'll just add to that just quickly on the tinnitus is that I've had many patients that come in and say, you know, I have this ringing in the ear, it's that and the other. Once we get them treated for hearing loss, they come back, so, you know, ask them, well, how's the tinnitus? How's that ringing? So, what ringing? I said,
Right.
"Oh, really?" So for many patients, not every patient, but for many patients, it does help them quite a bit. And just simply wearing a hearing aid does knock it down drastically. So
Right.
it
You
can be
know,
a huge help for many patients.
yeah, they say that for many people, the origin of their tinnitus is the brain not hearing the natural world of sound.
Hmm.
So as the hearing loss in certain pitch areas, the brain will actually create a pitch to kind of
Yep.
self-stimulate. Well, guess what? When we give the brain back those sounds, it can turn down that internally generated
Absolutely.
sound. So, so yeah, and that's why when we talk about it, we really kind of really evaluate what the cause is, contributing factors, and then if we address the needs of your hearing first and foremost, quite often that's all we need to do. But there are extra tools because some people do need a little bit of extra help in managing with that. So I'm going to just kind of wrap up with a few takeaways that I hope you've learned today. And the types of things that we want to consider as to why do I need to do something about my hearing? If I'm not sure I have a hearing loss, or I think I might have the beginning stages, or maybe I know I have loss, but I think it's getting, and I know it's probably getting worse. Why do we need to take steps to understand more? Well, number one, we want to make sure that you have improved hearing for all the environment of sound around you, because there are certain safety and awareness, environmental awareness kind of issues. I mentioned, like if you're taking a walk down the sidewalk and let's say there's getting ready to cross the street, if there's a car approaching behind you, or maybe a bicycle that's getting ready to pass you and they're giving you a little ring of the bell or giving you a little shout, I'm passing on the right or I'm passing on the left. Just being aware of what's going on in your environment will keep you safer. So that's important. Also, you know, just improving the ability to be engaged in those social situations, staying in touch with your loved ones, whether that's in person or through FaceTime, video chats these days, being able to hear and keep that engagement going improves the quality of our life and is advantageous to keeping our brain more active as well. Keeping active, keeping with ease of learning, and all of those things, even in challenging listening environments, being able to participate in those kinds of things. And as I mentioned, being able over the phone or with FaceTime, they help to maintain your independence too. You don't have to rely on others to hear for you in those situations. So that's a big important factor as well. And as we know now, kind of reducing the overall stress on your brain by not having to listen as hard, apply that extra effort, that's going to keep your brain younger and keep your brain fit going forward as well. So there are kind of like three final steps that I would kind of summarize. What do I need to do to hear better or hear my best? Number one, and we can check this off because you've kind of attended the seminar today to become more educated. So learning all that you can about hearing loss and about if you have hearing loss, what available options there are is always the first step in making good decisions about what to do. The second step is to find someone like Scott Aiken at Premier Hearing Solutions who are knowledgeable, experts in the field, stay on top of the technology as it changes, and most importantly, know how to match the potential solutions to your particular needs, because everybody is a little bit different. Everybody's lifestyle is a little different. And this is a very important kind of key on this journey, is finding a partner to work with to help you navigate the decisions that you will need to make. And then last but not least is, if you haven't gotten that baseline audiogram, don't delay. You need, even if you're not really having much difficulty now, it's a record of where you are currently, and that'll be very helpful if you do develop more hearing problems later on down the road. If you've had your hearing tested before, so you know you have hearing problems, but it's been maybe a year or two, schedule an appointment with Scott to have that evaluation updated so you know currently where you stand. And you'll also have the opportunity to actually listen to new technology and hopefully have that Widex moment demonstration, that aha moment of hearing that sound quality. So means of doing that, and I'll let Scott kind of fill us in on the easiest way to get in touch with him, but I do have his office phone number, and I would definitely encourage you to take a look at his website, www.premierhearingsolutions.com. Great information there, and an easy way to get in touch and make an appointment as well.
Absolutely, and it's very, very easy to make an appointment right online. You can call anytime. You can call the number that you see there, the 561-377-2883. We also have a section just to educate you. When I was asked, hey, do you want to do this educational webinar? I said, absolutely I do, because the more educated you are, the better decisions you're going to make for your future and for your hearing. And we talked a little bit before about how people tend to put off hearing tests. And what they say is that it's about 10 years people usually put off getting their hearing fixed or tested. And I think the hardest thing for me as a healthcare provider is to have a patient come in and they put it off, they put it off, they put it off. And it gets to a point where I can give them the best hearing aid I have, the best thing that's there, and they're still going to have trouble because they waited too long to start giving that brain the stimulation and that information that it needs. So there's a rehab period, and it takes a little bit longer than if somebody were to address it sooner. So as a healthcare provider, my heart aches when somebody comes in and is really struggling and has really put it off too long. So I always encourage people, if you're over 55 years old, get tested, get a baseline test, get it done. We'll keep it on file, at least know where you're at. We'll keep an eye on things, and as things progress, when it's time to, we'll get you taken care of.
And for those that maybe, I know some in the audience today have actually already been into your office and are currently clients of yours, but for those that are new to your office, we do have the address there, but could you give them just a little description of where you're located?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I also have videos on the website that give the actual video, cues, but
Right.
But we also have just past RCA Boulevard. So if you're heading south on Prosperity Farms Road, just past RCA Boulevard will be the next right-hand turn. So it's really easy for those that know the area. There's a Knights of Columbus on that street as well. So you'll pass the Knights of Columbus, past RCA Boulevard, will be the next turn on your right. There's also a couple offices back here. There's some dermatologists. So I've had a lot of patients say, oh yeah, I know where that is. It's right next to my dermatologist is over there. So there's definitely easy directions as well online. So
great. Well, and I know for those of you that do come in and maybe have a listening demo and are interested in trying new technology, I know Scott will have some special offers for you as a result of attending the webinar today. So make sure to schedule that appointment, make sure to mention that you attended today. I'll just open the floor, see if Ben has any other questions before we wrap up and say goodbye. We've got about 2 or 3 more minutes.
There actually were a couple questions, but between Scott and yourself, you already answered them. They had to do with when to get tested or sound quality. So amazing job, quite honestly. You guys were both very informative and thorough. So I think you answered everything.
Excellent.
Very good. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We are going to be perhaps doing another, maybe right after the first of the year. So if you watch on the Premier Hearing Solutions website and Facebook page, I would encourage you to go there and kind of check in there and follow along. Scott's great about making sure that you're kept in the loop on new educational opportunities, and we'll have different topics kind of as we proceed throughout the year. So I'll wrap it up and say goodbye. And Scott, if there's anything you'd like to say in closing.
Thanks for attending. We look forward to doing some more of these for you all, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks and goodbye, everybody.